council had a closed session prior to this to discuss a legal matter regarding access to Winding Hill Way. So we'll just get the meeting started. See, I don't think our agenda is changing tonight. This is our last meeting before the August recess. We will have public comments on voting items in a moment. Before we do that, though, I would just like to let everybody know that we have some special guests this evening. We want to thank Marilyn Scolar for organizing our featured artist event. Tonight we have politically inclined cartoon art that is being drawn by some current and local political artists who are here this evening. We have our own Tacoma Park Bill Brown, and I should say Art is also, right, lives in Tacoma Park. Art Hondros, Eric Gordon, and Stephen Loya are all here, and hopefully will be here with us for most of the evening. He's not here. So I checked. Terrific. And their artwork is also being displayed in the community center. So after you leave here, and it'll be up for a bit, please take a look at that. So welcome. Thank you for coming this evening. All right. Tonight we will begin with public comments on voting items. Our first voting item this evening will be a resolution authorizing execution of a development agreement with Neighborhood Development Company for the redevelopment of Tacoma Junction. So if anyone would like to speak towards that, please come to the podium. Thank you. And Ms. Berger did request extra time prior to the council meeting. Okay.
Thank you all for your efforts to come up with a plan that works for everyone. Something that works for everyone is not really easy, is it? Based on what has led us to this point, we remain concerned about the co-op's future. When the city signs the LDA, which all council members now support, we will be faced with trying to build something on a very shaky foundation. There is much to overcome if NDC, city, and co-op are truly going to find that plan that works for all. Why do I say that? The loading dock issue has come to symbolize the dichotomy we face. From our very first contact with NDC, the co-op operated with the understanding that the proposed site layout that accompanied their winning proposal remained in effect. Throughout the past 2 years, we have consistently requested plan updates if any changes were contemplated. Not until 6 weeks ago did we receive a revised plan of any kind, and this one was presented as the only one acceptable to NDC. They explained to us that to build a real loading dock with safe access for large trucks would make the project economically unfeasible for them because it was such a small site it would take up too much land that they needed to develop to maximize profit. In the co-op's response to the city's inquiry as to whether we would be interested in mediation, while expressing our willingness to do so, I stated that at no time during our discussions had NDC ever shared how they determined that the dock would be economically unfeasible, or how much their profits would be reduced if they provided one. Nor have they ever expressed to us any willingness to consider working with us on some value engineering that can conceivably reduce their costs and loss of revenue while providing us with the unloading area we need. We suggested that NDC share the study they did so the co-op could possibly consider helping to negotiate a cost-sharing arrangement. This was exactly the type of collaborative, creative problem-solving the council has urged the co-op to propose. But what was the response? At the council meeting last Wednesday, Adrian Washington explained that NDC had decided not to include a loading dock because, and these are his exact words, to create a loading dock for them would completely dominate the site. We determined this was not in the public interest. No mention of economic feasibility once the co-op had gone on record as being willing to explore helping to defray costs. Wouldn't this have been the perfect opportunity for brainstorming together to find a way to make a loading dock more aesthetically appealing instead of saying there will be no loading dock? If you think about it, what makes the loading dock at the back of the development not in the public interest? How would it dominate the site? Presumably the 18-wheelers would continue to make their deliveries in the early morning as much as possible, probably before the other businesses in development even opened. Yet no one on the council questioned this. Funding, aesthetics, what was the real reason? When Councilmember Qureshi asked what types of consultants NDC had used to reach their conclusions about the loading dock, Mr. Washington responded he had trusted the talented members of his own staff, which included an internal architect and engineer. I kept hoping to hear that NDC had consulted an expert in the operation of a retail store, especially a grocery store that has unique delivery and health code needs, before deciding that their plan would work for the co-op. They certainly never asked us. On May 4th, 2016, our attorney sent NDC a list of 12 areas we would like to address in any agreement we might come to. We're anxious to get back to working with NDC on that list once an acceptable process is finalized. And we are so committed to making this work that we'd like to agree to make certain points binding on both NDC and the co-op. And we have certainly invited members of the council to sit in and observe on the good faith bargaining that's going on. The values stated by the International Cooperative Alliance says, cooperatives are based on the values of self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, equity, and solidarity. In the tradition of their founders, cooperative members believe in the ethical values of honesty, openness, social responsibility, and caring for others. Don't these sound exactly like true Tacoma Park values to you? Please don't lose sight of them as you make decisions tonight and going forward. Thank you.
Any other comments regarding the resolution authorizing execution of a development agreement with NDC? Go ahead, Mr. Urington.
Hi, Paul Huebner, Carroll Avenue. And I am here just to caution you a little bit that I think your minds are made up, but you're about ready to embark on a deal that's going to last a century. A century ago, Carroll Avenue was a dirt road, and my house was practically brand new. And now there's this great urgency to come to this decision with the critical element of the development still up in the air. And that's the loading and the unloading. And if these folks haven't come to a decision, they've submitted 2 or 3 recently in the last 6 weeks, I think that you're hopeful that they'll come to a conclusion. Well, if they've come this far in 6 weeks, when you reconvene, maybe they'll actually have something that's tangible, that's workable. So this decision is going to last well beyond all of us. And I would caution you that this is the kind of thing that you'll be remembered for good or for bad. And it affects a lot of people, and it affects our entire community. So I would caution just jumping right into this. I know everyone would say that they've studied this and double studied this and read everything. Well, there's still no conclusive answer on how the latest permutation has them having a loading zone out front for construction and staging area. So then where do the tractor trailers go? If they're going to be taken off site and loaded and offloaded, well, maybe they'll put them out here out back and you'll pay for the refrigeration unit. I mean, there's a lot still very much in the air. And maybe it's time for you guys to take a step back and actually contemplate this aside from all the turmoil. And that this month may be the time to do it. So, good luck.
Good evening. My name is Diane Curran. I live on Montgomery Avenue. I've talked to a number of you about the proposed agreement, and I am one of the people that participated in the petition by 600 people asking you to make some changes to the development agreement. I just want to say on behalf of, I don't know if I can speak for 600 people, but I think I probably speak for a lot of them, that we very much appreciate the mayor and the council being so responsive to our concerns. And, you know, like everything in life, we didn't get everything that we wanted, but we think that the agreement as it is now has some significant additional protections for the city and the co-op. The independence of the city is much more assured by the agreement as it's been revised. There's much clearer provision for addressing the co-op's needs as the development is planned. And I really just want to thank you for being so responsive to us. Thank you. And we are all very much looking forward to the next steps and hoping that we can participate and make a contribution to making this really a good development. Thank you.
We're going to hold you to that, Diane. Don't worry. That's coming next.
Hey y'all, my name is Carter Doherty, Crescent Place, Ward 1. We urge all of you, we of Revitalize Tacoma Junction now, to vote in favor of the development agreement. My friend Neil Cohen and I, with help from others, notably Jeff Trunzo over there and Amy Barron, have worked a lot to get where we are, and we hope we move ahead. We heard from a lot of people early on who were really harsh critics of the co-op, and they didn't want to place any particular emphasis on the co-op. And now some of these people have told me privately that the development agreement coddles the co-op too much, on and on and on. And to the people who are looking at this agreement skeptically for this reason, I have one phrase: please don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. And I also have a few key points to make in that respect, is that we established last year that the redevelopment of Tacoma Junction could happen with a private developer when the council chose NDC. Now we have a roadmap for making that happen, so let's use it. The second thing is that the development agreement gets Tacoma Park out of the landowning business, at least at Tacoma Junction. And even if you feel like the co-op has used the fact that the parcel is city-owned unfairly, you should want this agreement, because this moves us out of that situation. Third, the termination clause that's been added is not a means for the city to put its thumb on the scales in favor of the co-op. It's a way to protect all of Tacoma Park's interests, not specifically the co-op. They might overlap, and I understand not everyone agrees on this point, but they are not the same thing. This is essentially the argument that Peter Kovar has made in emails to our ward, and I appreciate that. I've heard that the phrase nuclear option used to describe this clause. That's a high bar, and we hope it stays there. Finally, the council is keenly aware that abandoning this development would be a pretty big black mark on its tenure, and I have told people that our elected officials are motivated. There was a 7-0 vote last year, and maybe we'll get another one of those tonight. So the prospects are good for actually moving through with this. There were some people from time to time who saw me and Neil in particular as being sort of anti-co-op, and I feel like that they always misunderstood what we were seeking. Neil and I repeatedly warned off people who wanted to, as one person said to me early on, come to the council meetings and say bad things about the co-op. We weren't having anything of that. The co-op is a private business, and if people want to hold it dear, they have every right. If they want to do like I do and shop there occasionally, they have every right. If they want to do it every day, all the more power to them. I will say that many of us who are recent revivals to Tacoma Park grew up with co-ops where people worked their share and where food was cheap. My co-op was Weaver Street Market in Carrboro, North Carolina, and my wife went to the first alternative co-op in Corvallis, Oregon. We do hope the Tacoma Park Co-op can thrive and grow and become like the co-ops that we enjoyed in years past. For that reason, I really do want to acknowledge the work of Betsy Taylor and a clutch of other people who have made clear that this development can work for the co-op. We, like them, want the co-op to succeed, and in the context of this development, with some creative thinking and more hard work, it can happen. Thank you.
My name is Mark Sherman. I live in Ward 3, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the ward in which this property lies. And I am coming very late to the process. I was not at the event last week where everything was laid out. And so I run the risk of speaking with inadequate information. Nonetheless, I was here about a year ago when this was discussed. And I remember you, Councilmember Schultz, saying that perhaps it would have been better in the original request for proposals to stipulate that any proposals submitted ensure the viability of the co-op. And so my recommendation is to address that error in the original RFP. Because if the RFP is flawed, then any proposal developed pursuant to that also runs the risk of being flawed. I realize it would be difficult to step back at this juncture, but nonetheless, I would hate to see you proceed on the basis of a flawed original request for proposals. Thank you.
Good evening. Colleen Cordes, Ward 1. I am a member owner of the co-op, and that makes me part of the at least 34% of Tacoma Park households who are owners of the co-op. So we're talking about a business community of a third of Tacoma Park that is affected here. And this is a third of Tacoma Park who are owners of a business that is dedicated to providing well-paid jobs with great benefits. Most cities in the U.S., most good politicians like Bernie Sanders are looking for businesses with a triple bottom line that are going to provide great jobs. They're trying to bring them in. We've got a great tenant like that right now, and we are risking with this agreement because you're making it ever more hard for the council to publicly say this isn't going to work. But the co-op is telling us that the negotiations are not really going in the way of making it possible for them to stay. So I just want to pass on something I learned from my mother. I'm one of 8 children, and what she taught us is not that none of us are special, but that every single one of us is special, and we each treated each other like we were special. Yes, the co-op is special. Yes, the development community is special because they have the potential to really help us do economic development. But we have to expect real community values for everybody in the picture, including the council, including the community, including the co-op, including the developer. And these community values are encoded in Tacoma Park's laws and policies. They're not just our values, they are our laws and policies. And so the co-op also has it encoded, this triple bottom line. I'm not sure about the developer. I hope, if they haven't yet, that they will commit to that kind of triple bottom line here and make this a real showcase for the country of what a triple bottom line can do. They could raise investment capital from all of the socially responsible investment community, open up all kinds of doors for this. The other thing I want to say is that I just want to make it clear, I signed that petition, and I'd like to represent some of the people, I don't know how many of us we are, who do not feel that it's time to go forward with this development agreement, who feel it's premature, that we need something like a traffic study to make sure how big of a development we can do, that we really need to have a better protection from the co-op. If we're going to mention residential units, put affordable residential units before it, because we have a crisis with affordable housing, and the city's dedicated to addressing it. You own this property, make sure this is affordable housing, and also the trees. What happened to the protection for the trees on that hillside? And let's make sure some shade trees are called out in the development agreement as being part of what we mean about being green. Thank you.
Any other comments this evening?
Mary Jane Machui, Ward 2. I live about 4 blocks from the co-op. I would like whoever, the co-op or whoever the heck ends up having a business here, have a stipulation on their contract they will try to hire people with developmental and psychiatric disabilities. My son applied for a job there. He wasn't even given the decency of a thank you letter. And we've lived there longer than the co-op, and we've been there 31 years almost. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? So if you would like to comment on the development deal with Tacoma Junction, now is the time to do it.
Good evening. Steve Ney, Woodland Avenue. I share the same deficit that a previous speaker did about lack of kind of recent knowledge about where this is going, and what's happened. But I'm kind of cautioned by some advice my late mother gave me, which she often didn't follow, and neither do I, which was don't rush. Now I know this has been a project that's been considered, and pending for years, but in a way, if you delay a little longer, then so what? Or that's the question: is what would be lost by a further delay? Certainly it's not positive to have a delay, but it might be if you can get something for it. And it seems, I've seen the posters outside the co-op of the loading zone. It looks, just on first glance, and I don't know, I'm not a traffic guy, but when you see trucks, the path of the trucks taking over the entire sidewalk for loading and unloading, it looks dangerous because we have pedestrians, kids, et cetera, and all the other traffic going in there. What I'm getting to is that the co-op has always been stated to be the priority of most people, I think, on the council, and I think of many in the community. I'm also an owner of the co-op. A little piece of it, though. But so why not have the deal, the co-op and NDC, work out these issues now? Kind of what Mark Elrich said, I saw on an email last week. You know, you have the most leverage before rather than after an agreement is made. Give them another month, 2 months, work out as many of the details as they can about some of the key points, loading and unloading, and then bring it back to the council to sign the agreement, which is much better than it was from what I've seen. A lot of major changes, good changes were made. But I'm saying, let's let the two parties come together, put this thing, table it for a few weeks or months, 2 months, and see what happens. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Betsy Taylor. I was also one of those who helped organize the petition. And I just had a couple of quick comments. I too want to say thank you to all the parties involved, especially to the City Council for all your hard work, especially to the co-op for all your hard work, and to the developer. I felt like everybody was trying to give and find a way forward that would be a win. I also just want to say, you know, I and Diane, who spoke earlier, can't speak for the 600, and we heard from Colleen. And so I think what we take from that, many people are concerned about the traffic, and I know that that's part of the next step. But I just want to mainly to thank everyone for the good spirit, including the Tacoma Junction, Neil and Carter, but also to ask everybody here to stay highly engaged. The advisory committee that's being set up is not really responsible for making substantial decisions or recommendations. That's in the charter. They're there to help guide, but not to make specific recommendations. And everyone in this town who cares about this future really needs to stay engaged. So just ending again with a thank you, and most particularly to the mayor. Thank you.
Hi, Steve Dubb. I live on Eastern Avenue, just on the other side, in the D.C. side of the border. But I was on the Tacoma Junction Task Force a few years back, as well as a former board member at the co-op. And, you know, it occurs to me that if the council were to set parameters and a time limit, you might actually get a resolution. And if you don't do that, you might not. And then I think, as I recall from the task force, the expansion of the co-op was one of the centerpieces of the proposed development of the Citizen Advisory Committee with 20 people. So it would be a shame if a development agreement was put into effect that actually ended up endangering the co-op's existence in Tacoma Park. So I don't think that needs to happen. It sounds like there's a lot of goodwill, but it sounds like the council would be wise to make approval conditional on getting this resolved, rather than, you know, approving the agreement and hoping it's going to get resolved, because that seems unlikely to be an effective path.
Good evening. I'm David Blockstein, live on Sycamore Avenue, Ward 3, and I'm also a member owner of the co-op. And first, I just want to thank all of you for the incredible amount of time and effort and thoughts that you've put into the process. My wife and I are among the 600 or so that have signed the petition. I don't know enough about what has happened in the last week to know whether that is now moot or not. But I do want to raise one point that I hope that you have addressed, and that this isn't a 11th hour issue. But my understanding is that the site there, the parking lot, is all built on fill, and that it's not natural environment, that it's human-made landfill, and I just hope that in the process here that somebody has tested the physical strength of that site, and that you have the appropriate protections for the city if it turns out that the site is not strong enough to actually hold the construction. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments this evening? We'll get you the microphone, Mr. Lovelace, in a moment. Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lee Peterson. I'm in Ward 2. I'm relatively new to Tacoma Park, but my wife has been here for 50 years, and she was actually part of the starting of the co-op. And my two lovely daughters I brought here because I wanted them to see that we do want to keep the co-op for another 35 years. And I know you all are really working hard to do that. But let's just do it right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Lovelace.
Yes. Yes, my name is Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate, living at 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, the Franklin Ward 4. One thing I want to do is I want to announce a couple of things coming up. Make sure people at Tacoma Park and you people know about it also. On August the 2nd, the first Tuesday in August, at 6 o'clock p.m., we're having the National Night Out. It goes from 6 to 9 p.m. I believe it's right out here at the elementary school. I would like to ask people to come and join the support for the good police officers who are out there and pay them recognition. By paying the good officers recognition and appreciation, we might be able to turn the other police officers who are on the fence, who are about to go stupid or do something stupid, to change their minds and ask for more training. And we might encourage the other police officers to speak up when another officer does something egregiously wrong or something. Second thing I'd like to announce, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki commemorations we hold every year down in Washington, D.C. as a demonstration against violence and the production and use of nuclear weapons and power. I'd like to invite everybody to come down to Washington, D.C. and have it. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki one is at 6:30 p.m. and the Nagasaki one is at 9:30 p.m. in front of the White House. I'd like to ask everybody to come on out for a nice night for a peaceful protest. August the 13th, we're having a march against gun violence with the gay and lesbian community, to ask everybody to come out there and remember what happened in Florida last month, and ask for it to never happen again, and ask for the control of these stupid guns and the abolition of assault weapons in their high-powered magazines. Also, I'd like to tell you people, I wish you luck on your recess. You know, like I tell everybody out there, you guys have done a wonderful job. And I want to tell everybody out there, see you in September. Yep, when your resource is really done. Yep. Well, and then next thing you know, we'll be welcoming you back on I think it's the 7th of September, I believe it is. That's the first Wednesday after Labor Day, I believe it is. Thank you very much for letting me share, and I enjoyed working with you people as your peace delegate, and I always will. So continue on the good work, everybody. Remember, vote with your conscience in and outside the chambers, that is, both in the chambers and outside the chambers. Vote what's on the agenda, and vote with your conscience, and put things on the agenda as your conscience sees fit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Levis. Are there any other comments on the resolution to authorize execution of the development agreement with NDC? Okay, so this is the time if you'd like to speak regarding the redevelopment of Tacoma Junction. Okay, and we'll move on to our second voting item. This is the resolution establishing the Community Consultation Process Advisory Committee for the Tacoma Junction redevelopment and appointing members to that committee. Does anyone have any comments on that? All right, we will move on to our third voting item this evening. It is the second reading ordinance amending the Tacoma Park Code regarding the restricting the commercial use of plastic single-use carry-out bags. Any comments on that? No? All right, sorry, I saw someone getting up, they're leaving. The fourth item tonight is our second reading ordinance authorizing an FY 2017 budget amendment number 1. Any comments on that? Moving along, our fifth voting item tonight is the second reading ordinance extending permit parking area 6 to include the 1100 block of Kingwood Drive. Our sixth voting item tonight is a single reading ordinance authorizing detailed design development for the library renovation based on the June 2016 concept design. Any comments on that? No? Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart and council members. My name is Tim Ron. I'm a resident of Ward 1 and the current president of the Friends of Tacoma Park Maryland Library, also known as FTPML. While I am here as a citizen, my comments most likely represent the majority of view of the FTPML board. More than a year ago, when the council began to deliberate on the library renovations, I'd also like to mention that before that, there was a study that the library initiated where we had significant discussions about what the library would entail going forward. Anyways, when the council began to deliberate on the library renovations, a number of us were here as book waivers to advocate for the council to approve that an architect develop initial plans for the library renovation. You approved that. Many, including a number of younger and passionate citizens, spoke eloquently that evening about how much the library means to our community. Since that time, our community has listened to presentations, participated in discussions with the architect, and most recently joined the council in a walk-around where the architect, Greg Lukemire, reviewed the plans and described what would be involved if the plan were improved to create a more substantial renovation. I have no preference for either of the plans. I've spent some time looking at them. I think they both represent a significant improvement on the current building and will provide a space our community needs for the library's collection and programming. More importantly, and I really think this is an important point to make, there's nothing that has really substantially happened to the library structure, I believe, for almost nearly 50 years. That's a half a century of waiting for newer improved systems and infrastructure. In a communication to our ward, Councilman Kovar indicated his support for the library renovation and his intention to vote yes. As part of this statement, Councilman Kovar wrote that he was, quote, in favor of renovating it to help ensure it can be a vital 21st century institution. This statement expresses the single most important reason for the library renovation: the need to bring our library into this century. By doing that, it will serve the needs of our community for many years to come. By providing increased space for the collection, meeting spaces for groups, and it will ensure the library will evolve to continue to support the needs of our community. I urge you to vote tonight and adopt the ordinance authorizing the city manager to sign a contract with Lukemire Partnership for detailed design work so that this project can be moved forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deb Nelson, another book waiver. I'm also on the Friends board. So when I left Seattle to take a job at the Washington Post way back in 1999, I ended up in Tacoma Park because of the schools, the diversity here, and its library. The fact that this community, was willing to invest in its own library said so much about its values. But it's so much more than a symbol, and I think you heard that from kids and everybody who came here before. I mean, it's a resource, it's an incubator, it's a refuge for our youth and for many of their parents. And to stay that, it needs to grow and evolve. So I would just encourage you to go forward with whichever design strikes your fancy. Thank you.
Any other comments on the ordinance authorizing detailed design and development for the library renovation? All right. Our next voting item tonight, item 7, is a resolution affirming authority to exceed contracted amount of attorney fees related to the Tacoma Junction project. Any comments on that? Okay. Then our final item tonight is a consent agenda. The consent agenda includes a single reading ordinance authorizing the execution of a grant agreement with the Tacoma Park Independence Day Committee, a resolution providing for the City Council's summer recess, a single reading ordinance authorizing the purchase of 7 vehicles for the police department, a single reading ordinance authorizing purchase of the installation of police vehicle equipment, a single reading ordinance authorizing a contract with Complus Data Innovations for parking ticket management, a resolution providing for the appointment to the Committee on the Environment, and a resolution providing for appointments to the Emergency Preparedness Committee. That is all in a consent agenda. If you have any comments on any one of those items, please come to the podium now. Okay, seeing none, we will move on now to just any general public comments people may have. No? Mary Jane?
I'm Mary Jane Machuey, Ward 2. I'm very, very concerned about the fact that most property is owned by white people in Tacoma Park. It's racist, and people just call how great this city is because of the diversity. If you look at the diversity, it's mostly blacks and darker skinned people in the apartments, and the people own property who own the power in this city. Therefore, are mostly white, wealthier whites than me. I don't want to say, but you look at our neighborhood. Our neighborhood's been gentrified. It's like spent $1 million to have the street work, which I don't like. Most of our residents don't like, because a few upper-class people who moved in after me didn't even ask my opinion. Never asked me about the speed humps near my house. They never asked me about the street narrowing. The only thing they asked me about the sidewalks. They didn't ask. It's hard for me to drive. My hands shake now when I go down my street. I can't get out of my driveway as well because of the way the speed hump was placed. And people speed up, and when they right where I'm at, they speed up because they go every 4 or 5 speed humps. So they speed up when they go past my driveway. And it helped other people, but I'm just really concerned about this. And part of Ward 2 that used to be in Prince George's County, we are mostly good people. We are diverse. We're probably the only diverse area in the Tacoma Park left, where there's black and white and brown people, and we're not all wealthy. And all the houses are selling for $600,000. That is becoming less and less diverse. I'm sorry. It really bothers me. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Just come down.
My name is Martha Feldman, and I live in Ward 2 also. Is that correct? I did not plan to come and talk about this, but this is an issue that really bothers me, which is the no right turn sign on Ethan Allen onto Jackson Avenue. And it's enforced, I think, from 3:30 to 6:30. I and several other residents I know have gotten tickets there. Every day, the police, if they're there monitoring it, give out 3 tickets, 5 tickets. And I've got to say that the sign telling you can't turn right is after the point at which you're supposed to turn right. It's an illegal sign. It is not up to code, and something needs to be done. I've looked at the street. I see that there's a problem with putting signs, at a level where people can see them. But if you're behind a car that's taller than yours, you can't even see that sign until you cross Jackson Avenue, where I live. And so I think the city really needs to do something about it. When I went to court, and I did not have to pay my ticket, and I've heard the same from other people, and I don't know what to say. We're robbing people and making them pay $90 when we have a sign there that no one can see. And I'm not complaining about the no right turn, but we shouldn't be robbing people driving through our city. Thank you.
Any other public comments this evening? No, she's on.
I will try to keep this very short, and this is a general comment about the co-op as the business that the most residents are owners of in Tacoma Park. I think we can safely say. I just wanted to explain where that 34% comes from in terms of the percentage of households in Tacoma Park that are owners of the co-op. It's higher than that, but it's at least 34%. So there are 2,430 Tacoma Park households that are members of the co-op. In the Census 2010, which the city still has the data on its website, it identifies 7,162 occupied and unoccupied units. 593 of those were unoccupied at the time, and the city also thought there were 56 units that the Census Department had not identified. All of those are in the base. To be fair to everybody, all of those, the occupied and unoccupied, and those 56 missing units. So the 2,430 out of the 7,218, that's that total number, is 34%. However, the co-op has another 2,000 members that they don't have the physical address for. 35% of the members that they can identify, they know live in Tacoma Park. So if you take about 35% of that other 2,000, probably is quite likely the actual percentage of Tacoma Park households who are owners of the co-op is more like 45%. So I just wanted to explain where that figure comes from. It's at least 34, could be as much as 45% of us are owners of the co-op. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments this evening? No? All right. We will now move on to council comments. Do my council colleagues have any comments this evening? Last chance for a month. Councilmember Smith, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. It's always great to see residents that are interested in a topic. Many times we sit here on the dais and there isn't anyone in the room. So it's nice to see everyone here. I just have a few things I want to talk about. I'll try to make it quick because we do have more business at hand. First, I would like to thank WSSC, the General Manager, Carla Reed, the Deputy General Manager, Joe Mantura, for sending out crews to Maple and Maplewood on Sunday evening. There was a water main break, and for many of you that know that is part of the Carroll Avenue Bridge detour. So I stayed up very late Sunday to hope and pray that the road was going to be fixed in time for the bridge to be closed, and so that residents in Tacoma Park and those people that drive through the city can have an alternative route. So I want to thank the General Manager. Carla was recently appointed to this position, and she was great. We did have one snafu. The actual road needed to be repaved. That was done by a separate contractor. They did not notify the city. So during rush hour, we had a lot of backups. So I apologize to residents. We would have gotten a notice out, but I didn't know. Next thing, I would like to mention that I serve on the Council of Governments Transportation Planning Board. And last week, I wanted to mention this, but we ran really late. But I was part of the group that passed a resolution so that the city will receive $275,000 for the Safe Routes to School grant. This money will be used. If you bear with me, I'm going to read here. Construction of a bump out and crosswalks at the intersection of Philadelphia and Park Avenues. Sidewalk installation along Hodges Lane and Chestnut Avenue to connect to the schools in a raised intersection at Hodges Lane and Holly Avenue. Funds will also support enforcement activities, outreach, educational programming, and maintenance. So I think my colleague, Councilmember Kovar, will be very pleased with this funding. This August 3rd, this coming up August 3rd, the program that I started, Lunch and Learn, will have its parent night at John Nevins School on Elm. The event starts at 7 p.m. All my colleagues are invited. I hope they come out. This year we had almost 200 kids. If you're not familiar with the program, it feeds kids who are primarily on free and reduced meals during the school year, and it also offers intensive tutoring. It's a push to close the summer slide that many kids experience in Tacoma Park. And the last thing that I heard yesterday from the president of the Maryland Municipal League, Mayor Tracy Gant from Edmonston in Prince George's County. She has named me vice chair of MML's legislative committee. So thank you very much.
Congratulations. We were saving that one.
Yes. Yes.
Making sure we're all paying attention.
That's right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Mel?
Thank you. And thank you all for coming out tonight. We'll talk more about the co-op and the development agreement and the junction shortly, so I'll save my comments on that. But I did want to make a comment about the action proposed on the library, which is to say that I support the action tonight, but am also, and the action tonight is to continue with design and engineering work, a lot of the preliminary work on a design that I think is much improved from the previous rounds and is really exciting. But I wanted to indicate to the public that I support having a referendum question for you all to weigh in on the library project in our 2017 election, November 2017. So in this budget year, the continued design work would keep moving forward. We'd be more and more ready to be able to show exactly what that library would look like. But given that it's a multi-million-dollar project with a likely bond that would require significant borrowing, I think it makes sense to get your all's support. I would certainly, in suggesting a referendum, have it be accompanied by a council recommendation to approve. But I think it makes sense to ask residents that kind of thing on an issue of spending. And then I wanted to comment, as the city manager and the mayor know, there's a public art project happening in Ward 2 over off of New Hampshire Avenue, and we've had a couple of rounds, 2 rounds of designs so far, and we're still not quite getting it right. There's very few residents who like the designs. There's a lot who are sort of like, not what I'd hoped for. And then there's some folks who are, very concerned about the design and it just doesn't fit. So I appreciate the city manager and the city staff's feedback and also continued openness to all the feedback we're getting from residents. But I have a feeling we're going to need to, continue to look at that. And I still see lots of, the community's just as engaged, just as interested. But one of the things I wanted to correct, because I think there's some inaccurate information out there, at least on listservs, is that this was sort of imposed on the community, blindsided, no one involved in the process. So from the beginning, there's a community, a committee of volunteers throughout the community that looks at public art projects, that selects artists. Those meetings are open to all, just like all our meetings are. So, it's wonderful volunteers like many of you who serve on committees that help find that artist from a competitive process. The information that we would be doing a project was part of our budget process, so it was entirely transparent that there would be a project coming, and indeed many residents knew about it and weighed in and were interested in it. The initial meetings and announcement they were moving forward were made public to the ward by myself. They were communicated from the city staff and other materials that come more formally from the city. When the first public meeting was held with the artist, not only was that publicly noticed, but the city staff, the Housing and Community Development Department sent, I think, postcards to residents in the nearby area. And as those processes go, there's always someone who doesn't get the postcard, but I know that many people did receive the postcard, and indeed that initial public meeting that I went to was very well attended. There were 20 or 25 people at the meeting, children at the meeting, cookies at the meeting. So we've had lots of input. City staff has created websites to get information, and it's been a good process. And I just wanted to communicate that not only have we done that, but we're continuing to evolve and to try to get this project right. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. Couple of quick things and then an observation. One of the things on the agenda later on, I'm just going to mention this. I'm not objecting to anything in the consent agreement, but when we're talking about the purchase of the police cars, there's a separate issue, which is getting a better understanding and accounting for the ones that have been damaged in accidents as opposed to just the general wear and tear, which is what this is about. So I would like to pursue that one at a later time, just so to make sure we can understand that. I'm not going to object to the consent agreement that covers that today. Councilmember Smith mentioned the Lunch and Learn, and although I can't come to the evening event next week, I had an opportunity to visit with the campers and the staff there yesterday at the John Evans Andrews School, and it was really just a very uplifting process, and the kids were all great, and we also had Captain Condon from the police department was there at the same time I was, and they were slightly more interested in him than me, I think. But I can tell you a lot of the little kids were asked some great questions because it was about elections and politics, and some of the questions were actually more intelligent than many I encountered in 25 plus years on Capitol Hill, so I think it was really encouraging to see that with the kids. The one other thing I just wanted to mention, we have this long agenda today, and it's interesting because there are 3 items on there. One, of course, that we'll be talking about shortly is the Tacoma Junction development. We also have the ordinance on the plastic bags, and in addition, the library. And so I've been thinking about this and mentioned a version of this in one of the communications I sent to Ward 1 residents recently. There are all these institutions in the city that are among the things that I think a lot of residents believe make it a great place to live. And so one of those that we'll be talking about more is the co-op, another is the library. A third is actually the farmers market, and there are a couple of farmers markets. I attend one more than the other. And you could throw in something like the Piney Branch Pool, and there are probably additional ones as well. And so all of these, I think, on an individual case-by-case basis, we talk about some are private, some are public, some are a little bit of both, but all the city has chosen in one way or another to work with. And residents, some love them, some are neutral with them, some never go to some of them, some attend all the time, some go once a week. And I just think it's important for us to recognize that there are all these features, and it just struck me when I saw the 3 of them one way or the other, because the farmers market comes up in the plastic bag discussion, that it's important to be sort of generally aware that these things that make the city a great place to live in are supported in various ways, some by some people, some by others, and I think we have to try to figure out how best the city should try to work with and support and interact with them so that our city remains a great place to live. So I'm not saying, therefore, we do X, Y, and Z as much as just making that observation. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Schultz.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to say to the cartoon artists that the left side is my best profile. So if you wouldn't mind sitting over there, that would be helpful. I've been waiting for that. For a while. Lunch and Learn. I, along with Jared Smith and Mayor Stewart, attended the by invitation, an open house for this program that's taking place at the John Nevins Andrews School, as Councilmember Smith has already explained to you. This is the 4th year for this organization, and there's not too many things that happen in the city that we can sort of say that one particular council member kind of carried the flag for it. But this is a case where Jared Smith has carried the flag, and it was sort of started with him, and I hope he'll write it up sometime. So because I think it's a model of how things can get done. But now that he's been made deputy member of the Legislative Action Committee, it won't be long that I'll be nominating him for governor. I can just tell it's in the works. But to be serious, the Lunch and Learn program, I think they have 160 children or 170 children. 190. 190?
Yes.
That's more than there were when we were there a week ago. That is incredible, and it is very well organized. There's a tremendous amount of discipline. The kids they're just plain happy. And you talk to them, and I get a deep emotional feeling just to be able to stand up in front of these children, some of whom are, what's the youngest ones? Approximately 6 years old, all the way up to teenagers who work as counselors. It's really, really impressive. And I think I told Jared or somebody that I just cannot think of a better way for the city to spend its dollars than trying to help this program and others, and ACES, I think, is another one, that are doing this kind of work. So I just want to, aside from kidding around with Councilmember Smith, I just want to impress upon people what an extraordinary program this is, and that it has come from very small beginnings in just 4 summers, and Lord knows where it's headed. Some of the, I want to just mention something that's going on in my own neighborhood, in Ward 6, New Hampshire Gardens neighborhood. This is, we have been, for the last year, enduring the replacement of every water main in the neighborhood. 3.5 miles of water lines, mains and laterals. That work is done, and at the present time, another contractor now, NZI, which is one of our street road improvement contractors that we keep under retainer, is coming through now and rebuilding a lot of the curbs that have fallen into disrepair over the last 60 to 70 years. And then, so that'll be done probably in another month. And then the next contractor is going to be coming in and repaving from curb to curb, including the new curbs, all the streets, or virtually every street in the neighborhood. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think by the end of this calendar year, the word is that we will be completely done. It has been an endurance contest for all of us, but I want residents in New Hampshire Gardens to understand, because not all of them are on the listserv, if they're paying attention, to understand that this is what's going on and these are the next steps. On another matter of having to do with parking, I want the residents in Hampshire Towers and Tacoma Overlook, which are 2 12-story buildings, I guess between them there's close to 500 dwelling units in them, that are suffering. I mean, they're wonderful places to live because both of them have been extensively remodeled, but there's a parking shortage there. There's too many people with too many cars and not enough real estate to accommodate all the automobiles. I want people to understand that I'm trying my best to work with the owners of these two buildings and the tenant association in the one building and the condo association in the other, but I'm not getting anywhere because have not been successful in getting responses back from either the tenant association or the condo association. And I cannot do my work or really help to run interference for the residences, the people that live in those two buildings, unless I get cooperation from people who will provide me with information and input. So that's just to let you know, those people to know that it's something that I'm truly concerned about. I truly want to try to help. I can't promise any outcomes, but it's got to be a two-way street between residents and the city government. And finally, one of the other things that I worry about is that we're trying to develop an organization in the Crossroads area to a new business organization of businesses and property owners on both the Prince George's and Montgomery side of the intersection of University and New Hampshire Avenue, which is one of the busiest intersections in Maryland, to get ready for the Purple Line, which has begun construction for all intents and purposes. And it's been frustrating to try to get help. We've all been preoccupied, I think, with the Tacoma Junction project. I know a lot of city staff have too, but I really need the city to staff and the business community to help work together so that we have the power to be exercised by business and property owners, that the future of the Crossroads area will be under their control and not imposed upon by outside developers or decisions by the state government or the contractors who are building the Purple Line. We have to take ownership of what is ours, and this is split. The area is split by the county line. It's not easy to do, but this is I'm just saying this because I want people to understand these are some of the things that I'm worrying about and trying to make progress on, and it's not always easy. So I just that's all I really wanted to say tonight. You won't be able to hear from me for another 5 weeks. I'm sure you'll suffer from that, but
Give out your phone number.
Yeah, anybody want my phone number? No, never mind.
Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd just like to comment on a observation that Councilmember Kovar made about the co-op and several other organizations here in Tacoma Park really being a defining piece of the character of the city. One that came to mind that he didn't specifically mention is the Folk Festival. I think it's been an important contributor to the city, and for those of you who don't know, it's unfortunate to hear that there's not going to be a folk festival this year because of the lack of volunteers. And I just offer that as a suggestion. We've got a lot of people here tonight. I thank you for coming out, but you may want to look into joining the Folk Festival Organizing Committee so that this is just a blip of 1 year without the Folk Festival. I think it is important, as I said, to the character of Tacoma Park. A couple other just small things I wanted to mention. For a number of years, Safeway has been donating food to Adventist Community Services to help provide food for the very low-income members of our city and the neighboring area. They had a problem come up about a year and a half, 2 years ago. They were taken over by another company. But they found there was a problem where somebody who was getting donated food was bringing it back to Safeway without a receipt and asking for a refund of money. And they found this was happening very frequently. Much to my frustration, rather than try to solve the problem, they killed the program. And I think it's, like I say, it's been very frustrating that, again, just an attitude of not trying to see how to make the program succeed and overcome the problem, but to just terminate the program. With the number of co-op members here tonight, I would, Safeway doesn't have members, but if you all happen to be in Safeway and you mentioned your disappointment to Safeway, maybe we can turn this around. There is a Good Samaritan law in Maryland that safeguards companies like Safeway from a lawsuit because of bad food if they've given it to a food pantry. So, anyways, I think there are solutions, but we need to work towards solutions. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that for many years, my wife and I have provided food for 150 low-income families here in Tacoma Park. And because of some changes, that's every month, it's 150 families. My wife runs that program. Because of some changes that have taken place this month, she's in need of some volunteers for that program, and that's something that goes on during the day, 3 Mondays a month. And so if anyone's interested in helping out, it's a program that runs from about 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So if you have a couple hours on Mondays that you would like to put in some time, I'm sure she would appreciate hearing from you. Believe that's all I had for tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Qureshi is joining us by phone tonight. Councilmember Qureshi, do you have any comments for this evening?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. I just have a couple of updates. One, to pick up where Councilmember Siemens talked about the Folk Festival. We will be discussing that when we do vote on the budget amendment this evening. There has been a proposal by Laura Barkley of Old Town Business Association to do Folk at the Gazebo. This is not in any way to replace the Folk Festival, but to have some folk music on the same date, which is September 11th. And also to try to recruit new volunteers for next year's Folk Festival. So we'll be discussing that in a moment. Also wanted to let you know that we did have, seems like WSSC is very popular in our city. We had a meeting last night on the continuing issue of the work that's going to be done on Little Eastern. I will say the meeting was well attended, and at least from my perspective, I hope the residents feel the same way. I think we've made some movement in that direction with regards to WSSC, looking at an environmental study, paying attention to stormwater runoff, and reviewing the methods that they'll be using. So I think we're making some progress there. And another thing is to mention, if folks have been out on Carroll Avenue between Tacoma Junction and Lincoln, I want to congratulate my colleague, Councilmember Male, and myself, because 2 crosswalks after almost 2 years of bugging State Highway every month have been finally put in. And wow. So, yes, right? That's good news. And also, more crosswalk good news. I just want to thank our head of Public Works, who got State Highway to put in a crosswalk at Old Carroll when the bridge was closing. This was something residents had asked for. Our staff had identified. Unfortunately, there was some back and forth, and we thought it wasn't going to go in. And from the hard work of the head of Public Works, it did go in before the bridge closed. Or it's coming in. It's coming in. Okay, I got ahead of myself. Okay, this afternoon, I was part of a press conference with the general manager of Metro, Paul Wiedefeld, and Roger Berliner from the County Council, discussing Surge 6, which will impact the Red Line. This is the first part of the Metro Safe Tracks work that will impact the Red Line and Tacoma Park. It starts on Monday, August 1st. They will be just doing one track between Silver Spring on the Red Line. There's more information I put over there that you can pick up, and I think the city manager will discuss some other things that we're doing in Tacoma Park, but I wanted to mention that to you as well. And I think that is it for me tonight. Turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you. I do have a number of transportation items, and I think I'll start with Carroll Avenue Bridge closure, which actually happened this past Monday at 9 a.m. And as Councilmember Smith knows, we weren't sure with the water main break how that was going to come off. I have to say that it was really remarkable to see all of the agencies out pulling together on Monday morning very early. I was there from 5:30 in the morning to make sure that the water main break got dealt with and that the Carroll Avenue Bridge could close on time. One of the things I want people to know is that tomorrow and Friday, the detour route will change because Sligo Creek Parkway will be closed underneath the bridge while they're taking the railings and sidewalks off of the bridge. So the alternate detour route for Thursday and Friday is Old Carroll, Lincoln, and Maple Avenues. That detour route will also be 2 days later in August. Please go to the city's webpage. We have at tacomaparkmaryland.gov, Carroll Bridge closure. You can find all of the information about the various routes, detour routes, and times. We've had a couple of times when there's been dangerous situations with traffic because detours change, things happen. If you see something, please call the police department at their emergency number, which is 301-270-1100. That way we can get the police out to the scene, get the project managers contacted and get something dealt with any dangerous situation. I know we had a problem this morning with traffic lights out at Tacoma Junction. Wasn't related to that, but it added to the mess. Picking up on the mayor's comment about the WMATA Safe Track Surge number 6. So for 1 week, there'll be single tracking between Tacoma and Silver Spring, as well as some other restrictions on the red line. It will be a mess. So residents are strongly urged to prepare to get to work other ways, and especially telework, bike to work, or carpool. And we are allowing residents who want to get together to carpool that they can park for free in the city's lot at the junction, not in the co-op spaces along the rear fence. But that is something that we are allowing to get through next week. This is going to be a difficulty, but it is not going to be anything like the difficulty of Surge 10, which will be in October, which will have closures on the red line with no trains at all for some of the sections around us. So we're going to be practicing how we do business differently. We're also going to have, and I didn't put this in my comments, but found out that Montgomery County will be putting small signs along Maple Avenue and on Sligo Creek, helping direct bikers to various ways out of the area as a way to do getting to work or school or whatever by bike. We are trying to get out lots of information on transportation matters. Look at our website, follow us on social media, follow Tacoma Park Alerts, and we are trying to get that information out all the time. I've got some other information in the information I provided the council. I did put in this the response to the information that David Moon put out, Delegate David Moon, about Maryland municipalities that have large populations of people of color that receive a large portion of their municipal revenue from fines, and Tacoma Park was on that list. The information was misleading, and I wanted to let people know, and I've got some information that the council members can share as they wish, that the amount from fines is almost all from speed camera revenue. And speed cameras reduce accidents, they protect the safety of our residents that are in our neighborhoods, and they certainly are race neutral. Don't speed, and you won't get a speeding ticket. The amount of the percentage of money, of revenue for the city that comes from fines other than speed camera fines is about 1%. So it's very small. It's not the 10% that was listed in these documents that were provided. So I just want to make sure that if people saw this, we're not like Ferguson, where we're fining people that we arrest. This is speed camera fines. We also get a good proportion of our revenue from that because Maryland municipalities have very few ways to raise money. We don't have authority to do the kind of taxing of cell phones and things that other places have. We don't have sales tax. So we're not like other states. And so we do rely a little bit more on speed camera fines than might otherwise. And I want to note that the National Night Out is going to not be in front of Piney Branch Elementary School, but in back of it. And there's going to be some special activities, including a kickball game and dunk tanks. So if you want to dunk a favorite officer, we have some options. And I don't know if they're going to let council members get in there or not, but we'll find out.
I got it last year.
Yeah, I heard. And I do want to offer congratulations to Deputy City Manager Jason Damweber and his wife Amanda on the birth of their second child, Quinn, last Friday.
And the gender is?
Male. Yep.
Ms. Ludlow,
Yes.
are you going to send the updated information to the publication that?
Yes, we'll do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Yes, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I just ask one
Go ahead.
technical question on that?
Yeah.
Some of the tickets that we issue, we cannot keep the revenue where the ticket goes to the state. Is that correct?
Right. Speed camera fines do come to the city.
Right.
Almost all non-parking ticket fines, turn right on red or whatever, that doesn't come to the city. It goes to the state.
So could the actual amount that people are being billed from fines and forfeitures be higher? It just isn't part of the city budget. In other words, we don't have there's no incentive for us to.
Well, traffic tickets go to the state, so,
So it could
we
be
don't keep any record of how much
Right.
that money is.
Thank you.
Yeah, just with regard to National Night Out.
Yes.
It's being on that playing field behind the, where, is there advice on where we would want people to park on that? Can they park in the lot of the school itself in front?
I don't know the answer to that. Certainly can
Yeah.
park here and on the
Right.
streets.
Right.
We usually, people usually find a place.
Yeah, I know, just that each year I think the number of participants tends to go up.
And it's a nice event. I
Oh,
hope
it
a lot
is.
of people come out.
Actually, talking about National Night reminded me, I forgot about one thing in our update. As we discussed during our budget, we had a subcommittee of the council and myself, Councilman Siemens and Qureshi, meet with the city manager and representatives from the police department to review the RFP process that we looked at for the police consultant, and we'll be coming back in early September
That's right, to
with more
discuss that with
information
all
for the
council.
council and a recommendation for a way forward.
Right.
So, just wanted to mention that. All right. All right, and I don't believe, I know the city clerk sent around minutes, but I don't think anyone of us probably had a chance to review them, so we'll do that on our August recess. All right, so we will move now to our first voting item, which is the resolution authorizing execution of a development agreement with Neighborhood Development Company for the redevelopment of Tacoma Junction. Does the city manager or city staff want to say anything? Oh, here they are.
Yes, we've had wonderful staff working on this. As you know, we've got a revised development agreement. We have some changes that have been made that address the request by council from last Wednesday. We also have some corrected information on the amount that would revenue in the ground lease that has been provided, and I think that's it.
That's pretty much it. Do you have anything else to say before I ask for it to be moved?
No.
All right. Would someone like to move the resolution, please?
Move it.
Councilmember Siemens, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Councilmember Schultz, discussion? Okay, Councilmember Mail?
Thank you for the city staff for your work on this. I assume the city or our development attorney was also involved. So my thanks to them as well. And to all the members of the community who have either participated in the last rounds of meetings or have reached out by email or phone, including the co-op board members and co-op staff and leadership. I think we've made great progress in addressing many of the issues that have been flagged as important to people in the last couple of rounds, including the sort of the public, what do we call it, a roundtable, an open house? An open house. It's still not perfect, I know, but it's always hard to get to perfect. It's not the end of this process, so I think some people pay attention to one part of the process and then are surprised to come back and find that we've only moved, a couple of steps forward. And this is certainly just one step, because there's still the 120-day or longer period to try to develop an LOI with the co-op. Absolutely critical period. And I think we've done everything we can to try to create a fair negotiating space for NDC and the co-op to try to work out the issues that the co-op has raised with regard to loading docks and parking, both long-term and during construction, and for NDC to try to address its needs in the project during construction in the long term. And so that's really an essential period. We've created the ability at cost, at taxpayers' cost, to, if that doesn't work out, to be able to end the agreement. And that I think shows the faith that the city and the council have put in to the belief that the parties can find a way forward, but also in the importance of the co-op and trying to make this work out. Beyond that part of the process, there's still the whole site plan development and all the efforts to both integrate the community's perspectives through the process that NDC and the city have talked about, including the committee that we'll be speaking about later on tonight, to work the community into that process. Of course, we've got historic district planning overlays requirements that the county has created. There's all of the county zoning and master plan requirements. There's all of the process to get eventually a site plan approved by the county. There are all the criteria that we've established. We don't call them criteria in the agreement, but measures that NDC is required to make a good faith effort to address in the site plan. Things like public meeting space, I think is how it's termed, green elements of the design, accommodation for the co-op, and so on. To try to address those things in the site plan, again, there's the ability for NDC or the co-op, or NDC or the city, to, if that site plan does not pass muster from either side's perspective, to be able to move away from the agreement. And so we're not, it's a long process still ahead of us. I'm sure that it will have ups and downs, but I feel like we've created a very strong chance to move forward. And just to clarify some things that I've seen in emails that I think have been confusing or unclear, my understanding and belief, based on the information we saw in the open house, is that it's not that there is no loading proposed on the site under the designs that NDC has provided so far. It's that the loading that's been proposed is loading for large trucks, small trucks, but not 18-wheeler trucks. So that accommodation, I believe, at the back of the site has been in some of the designs that we've seen. That's something that I've seen residents say there's no loading proposed at all on the site, which of course wouldn't work for any new business space proposed for the site either. It's the 18-wheeler issue, I think, that's been of specific concern, and the use of a street pull-out space for 18-wheelers or other trucks, long-term and during construction, that has been, is the more specific issue. But of course, loading is key to almost every business. It's hard to think of any that don't have loading needs. I think maybe I'll stop there, but generally say that it's not perfect. I would rather us not be on the hook for up to $75,000 if we needed to terminate, but recognizing how important that is to creating fair, high-pressure negotiating environment for the co-op and NDC, and the difficulty of getting the perfect. I'm in the place where I'm willing to support this agreement.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. As most of you probably know, I voted in favor of the development agreement last week as it was written. But after receiving many emails and talking with my colleagues, I'm certainly supportive of the development agreement as it has changed. But I would just say overall, I have a concern. I have kind of a concern of the psychology of this thing that you know, the co-op's done very well at outreach to get its members involved in this, but I'm hopeful that the community isn't digging in on sides and not keeping an open mind. We need to work for success. I come from a business world where that was a commitment that you had to make, was that if you worked on a project, you wanted to work to see how you could make it succeed. And I'm hopeful that that both the developer and the co-op are really looking for solutions. Councilmember Mayo mentioned the 18-wheeler truck pullout, and I heard complaints that, well, that truck would have to cross 2 lanes to pull out back onto the road. And it's unclear to me how a truck would pull out of a parking lot onto Carroll Avenue as it does today without crossing 2 lanes to do that. It doesn't sound like an argument that's made when you're trying to figure out how to make something succeed. Anyways, I'll just say that I'm optimistic that that this development agreement is going to move us forward. I don't see it as a way out. I see it as a way ahead, something that we can use to keep moving forward and find the solutions that we need so that the co-op stays in town, that the co-op has the facility that it needs and wants after the development is done, but also one working with the developer so that the co-op can actually stay in business while the work is being done. That's a challenge that doesn't come with every project, but it's mandatory in this project. Thank you.
Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to say first, I think the process that we went through over the past few weeks to me was positive in the sense that lots of people in the community weighed in a public way and in a way that's sort of characteristic of, I think, how most of us view the approach that residents take here in the city, and to have a couple of different petitions, which together probably had something like 900 or more people signing on to them, I think is really just reflective of the level of engagement and involvement that people in the community have, and the fact that they care very strongly about this. From my perspective, this is land that the city owns, and I viewed the approach that I thought we should take as not, quote unquote, favoring a particular side, if I can put it that way, in terms of whether it was the co-op or NDC, but what was best in an overall sense for the city. And to me, that means a few things. Yes, some of the decisions were made before I was here, but I think the process had been public then as well, and the idea was that the co-op would be an anchor tenant and that the space would be developed and that this particular developer had been chosen. I didn't see any reason to back away from any of those specific commitments, but I also thought that it was important to ensure that our interests as a city looked at globally, and again, taking into account what I mentioned before about how there are these institutions in the city that many people believe make the city a great place to live, but on which people don't necessarily agree specifically on day-to-day operations of which ones they like or don't like. I thought that some of the suggestions that had been made by folks behind the one petition, particularly the three that we talked about last week, and several of my colleagues agreed on that, made sense. And to me, it wasn't, let's give the co-op more leverage, or let's give NDC more leverage in terms of the LOI termination or the potential of up to $75,000 that we would have to pay to NDC, but what works for us. And I thought that by the addition of these various provisions, that really was beneficial to the city, taking into account the interests of the other two parties to the negotiations. And I think that now, honestly, if we adopt this tonight, that gives us a framework, and I think as Councilmember Mail said, a little bit of a push in the LOI negotiations. And I hope really that both parties, I have not sat in on the negotiations. I've heard a lot of comment about them, but I think now's the time for the co-op and NDC to get creative in finding solutions. I'd like to help in that process. But I think that this document, with the changes that we've approved, and I think the staff and the lawyers and so on did a great job in working out with NDC, does give us a framework that we can use to move forward, I think, in a positive way, and I'm going to support it. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. First off, I'd like to thank staff for all their hard work on this. It's been a very long time since the previous council said that we wanted to move forward on developing an RFP, putting that RFP out, and, you know, hoping that there would be developers that were interested in this project. And so, you know, about a year and a half later, we're here potentially about to approve a development agreement. I would like to say that this is probably one of the most difficult votes I've ever had to make here on the council. I've received numerous emails from residents that are extremely supportive of the co-op, and let me say once again, I'm not against the co-op, but professionally I work with tenants, right, in commercial real estate, and I have never seen anything like this. I've never seen a tenant be able to insert themselves into a contract between two separate parties where they do not have an interest in whatever it is, whether it's a piece of land, whether it's in a building. I just have never seen it. I can't get my commission in a contract with a landlord because I'm not a party of the agreement. So I am just saying this is extremely unique situation. And yes, the co-op has gotten these concessions from the city council and city staff, but this is not normal. This is not business as usual. And another point I would like to make is there are many organizations and businesses in this community that would love support from the city council and from the staff to help them in their day-to-day business, for them to be successful. The items that are being placed in this contract on behalf of the co-op are going to help them be successful. They have value. Other organizations would like that same type of treatment. So I would just hope my colleagues, if other companies like Blessed Coffee or even the hospital, if they come to us, that we are more than willing to help them with whatever their goals are. Because I have not seen it. I have not seen any other organizations have the same type of treatment. When we went through the process with the hospital, it was adversarial. We didn't open up anything that was possible for what the city government was going to do for Washington Adventist Hospital that has 1,200 employees in the city of Tacoma Park. It's almost been here for 100 years. Never saw it. Didn't see it from residents and didn't see it from council, or not all council members. So I would urge everybody to understand that what is going to happen next with this development agreement is very unusual. And it has taken me a long time to consider whether or not I was going to support this. I've had many conversations with Mayor Stewart. She has been very persuasive. And other council members here on the dais, and some people in the community. So I would like to say that I will support the development agreement, but this is a very difficult decision. And I hope going forward that the co-op, the treatment that the council gives the co-op is the treatment we give every organization in this community. Oh, and one last thing on the site plan. Maryland state law says that if a council votes against a site plan, a supermajority of the planning board must overturn that vote. That is what happened with the zoning text amendment proposal that Washington Adventist University came up with last year, and I fought back with residents in Ward 5. So putting the site plan clause in the contract, we are already protected with state law. So I hope my colleagues will join me. I think we do have a majority, but this is a unique situation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Schultz?
We have come a long ways since the RFP was issued at the beginning of, very early in 2015, was it? 14? Is that right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to lose a year when you're my, when you're my age. Okay. Well, when you're having fun too. And it's not been easy. But by approving the development agreement tonight, where I'm at is I'm very optimistic, confident that the issues that confront the co-op and worry co-op members are going to be resolvable. I'm sure of that. One of the reasons is that I know that the co-op leadership is really determined to figure out how to get it done so that they can grow. And second, because now that we will have approved the development agreement, the developer, NDC, isn't going to have any excuse any longer not to sit down and to get themselves into very, very serious negotiations face to face with the members of the co-op. And my hope is that some of these matters that we've been worrying about for quite a while now will be able to get resolved pretty shortly. I actually believe that can happen. I'm pretty confident that it will happen sooner or later. So I'm excited about where we're headed, and I think this is an enormous turning point that will enable us to really get things done to the satisfactory of the co-op and the co-op members and the rest of the city's residents who are looking forward to seeing something happen in Tacoma Junction that isn't a parking lot. So that's where I'm at. That's why I'm going to support this vote.
Thank you. Councilmember Qureshi, would you like to say something?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to first thank the city staff and even the mayor for their hard work through the weekend and negotiating these revisions into the agreement such that we're able to add adequate protections for the co-op. I think I won't belabor my long speech from last week, but I will say that I used the word unprecedented in terms of this city council and the previous city council's support for the co-op. And I don't even know what other word there is, but the fact that we now have a termination provision which requires the city to put taxpayer dollars, $75,000 worth of skin in the game, not the co-op's money, but the city's money, to provide even more adequate assurance, I think, is a testament to how important we perceive the co-op to be as an institution in our community. With that being said, I think now it is up to the co-op and up to the developer to approach this next 4 or 5 months to negotiate in good faith. And that good faith requires both parties to be creative in how they will meet their respective needs, both during and after construction, and it will require sacrifice. So if anybody believes that this is not going to be difficult, every construction project is difficult and impacts the entire community and neighbors and alike. And there's going to be some inconvenience, but so long as we keep in mind the prospect of a revitalized Tacoma Junction that includes a diverse array of businesses, small businesses that are locally owned, and also a co-op that is 6,000 square feet bigger. If we keep the end game in mind, I believe we can get through this process. I do not want NDC or the co-op, and I just want to put this on the record, to believe that this council member, at least, is going to be easily convinced to terminate this agreement just on the basis that an LOI wasn't reached. I will be paying close attention and hope that to some extent we can get adequate updates so that we know how this process is moving along, because I'm not interested in relitigating this down the road. I believe we've done far too much, and now it's incumbent upon the parties to ensure that we have a future that includes development and includes an expanded co-op. And I strongly support this and will be voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Malley, you have something else to add?
Yeah, thank you, and I'll try to be brief. There were a couple of other issues I wanted to mention that have come up in past meetings. First, an issue that was raised earlier today about the stability of the fill soils. Just briefly, the city, through its earlier process, required both a Phase 1 and a Phase 2 environmental study. Part of what those studies show is the evidence of air pockets or gaps in the ground underneath the site that was tested through boreholes across the site, and I know that NDC is doing similar work to test stability of the ground. So that's one issue that just I wanted to address simply. Two other issues sort of concern to me. During this process, sometimes things come out that are inaccurate or misleading. And one of the things that I think is important that I've heard a number of times, and I did some work on it, so I just wanted to relay some information, is prices. People have talked about the co-op as being completely unaffordable, only for rich people, or the place that people rely on for 100% of their shopping. And so I use the co-op, which is within walking distance of my house, and I use Shoppers, which as far as I'm aware is the cheapest grocery store in the Tacoma Park area. And I went and I came up with 15 or 16 items that my family uses with frequency, like soy sauce and milk.
Hope not together. No,
no, not together. Tofu because my daughter's vegetarian, and sausages because my son is not. And I looked at the price of those at the co-op, the cheapest price they had available, and I went to Shoppers and I looked at the cheapest price they had available. And more than half of the items were comparably priced. If you just bought the items that were the same price or lower at the co-op, it would have cost me 9 cents more to shop at the co-op than at Shoppers. And I challenge anyone to find those same items at Whole Foods or Safeway or probably Giant, either in Hyattsville or in Silver Spring. And then there were some items that were way more expensive. Like sausages were $9 compared to $3, right? So there are differences. And if I had a longer list, I'm sure I'd find some more extreme differences between Shoppers and the co-op or between any of those other grocery stores. So I just really wanted to challenge those statements to say that the co-op is a place that has prices that I think for different products serve the community, could probably serve all parts of the community. And I've gotten a lot of feedback on those numbers. I provided details to residents in Ward 2 in a written update, and had lots of people confirm the exact same thing, that they find some things, they don't even bat an eye at, and other things that they do. And so I'm not saying my list is fair to the co-op. There's hundreds of products there, or to Shoppers, or that's representative of what everybody else did. But I think that's an important thing to clarify, because the co-op is, I think, important, and you provide services and you provide goods that are essential to people and that they can afford, whatever their price point is. The other issue that I wanted to just raise briefly, because I think this is a moment to do it, is the approach in a process like this to treating everybody who's part of the process with the assumption that they come at it with the best of intentions and with honesty. So I've seen, in my time on council, I've been described as a fascist. I've seen, disingenuous, misleading, many other words used, and I'm just speaking to myself rather than some of the debate that's gone on within the community. And I don't live life that way, and I certainly don't try to be a council member in that way. I think NDC, and I really appreciate Adrian Washington's comment last week, where he said what he likes to do is take his son, the places that he has built, and show him that he has done something good. And I take that as a sincere statement by somebody who is proud of the work that they do. And that's full stop. He's not an evil developer. I don't assume that people that come to us, whether they're a developer or a hospital administrator or whoever they are, have the worst of intentions. The same is true for the public. The same is true for the co-op and all the employees and all the members that you represent. You take people at face value and trust their word. And I think the same is true for all of my colleagues and city staff. And so for me, that's a really important way to govern. And if I'm supposed to be immediately suspicious of a body of people because of what they do for a living or where they're from and what they look like, I'm not your councilman. But if we're going to trust people and assume some level of faith as we go forward in deliberating and trying to reach agreement in difficult issues like this, then that's what I'm here to do, and that's how I'll work as a council member. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I'll just say a few words. Much has been said tonight and in the last few weeks, in the last few months and years, and I don't want to repeat those. Tonight I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to all the residents who shared their views, stories, hopes, and wants, not just for this redevelopment project, but for our community. And in particular, I really want to say thank you to those residents who have stepped up. And I hope you will continue to be engaged in this process, because we are just at the beginning. And we really need everyone to be involved to bring our community together. So please stay involved, and thank you for what you've done so far. To our city staff, thank you. Thank you for the long hours and the diligent work on this project. And again, it is just beginning, so rest up. I want to thank NDC, our partner in this redevelopment project, for listening and understanding that in Tacoma Park, we do things just a little differently. And we're a community that lives by our values. Thank you for understanding that. And thank you to the co-op, not to the members, to the staff, for all you do for our community and what you bring to it. And to my colleagues, thank you for your thoughtfulness, your flexibility, and your collaboration with working with each other, our staff, and residents. It is truly an honor to be the mayor of this city. And I ask as that we move forward that we really do put behind us some of the disagreements and misunderstandings, things that have been said when folks have been tired and it's gotten late and you've gotten 100 emails. And that 101 is the one you wish you could retract, but you can't. So I ask that as we move forward, because we have so much to do, that we take a breath tonight. We celebrate, in a small way, this one milestone and the progress we've made to date. And even as I say this, and I know this morning as I was thinking about this, a Robert Frost poem actually came into my mind. And the end of the poem is, I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. And I really do feel that. I've made a lot of promises, and I plan throughout this process to keep those promises. So thank you for all your input and patience, and stick with us as we move forward. All right, I think since, thank you.
Love it, love it, love it.
I think since Councilmember Qureshi is on the phone, do you want to do a roll call, even though this is a resolution for the city clerk? All right, I think we are ready to do it.
All right. Councilmember Kovar?
Yes.
Councilmember Mail?
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz.
Aye.
You didn't ask me.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes. All right. Well, I think we need a round of applause. Thank you, everyone. Good work. All right. We have one more resolution on the Tacoma Junction redevelopment. Let's do that, and then I think we'll take a little break. This is a resolution establishing the Community Consultation Process Advisory Committee for the Tacoma Junction redevelopment and appointing members to the committee. Would the city staff like to?
Yes, just there was just a small addition to the resolution in the longest whereas clause with the bullet points. This was something that had been mentioned before, and we've gone ahead and included it in the document. So it would say, clarify with NDC in coordination with city staff and the city council the aspects of the project's program and design for which community input is important for the project outcome. So that's identifying the role of the Community Consultation Process Advisory Committee, which we didn't change the name of.
No, that's their first task. Great. Before I ask for someone to move that, anyone have any questions? No? All right. Will someone like to move that, please?
So moved.
Councilmember Siemens, do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Smith. Do you want to do a roll call? Is it easier?
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilmember Kovar.
Aye.
Councilmember Mayo.
Discussion. I'm sorry. Did I move so quickly?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Discuss.
We're moving the creation of the committee and the appointment of its members, right?
That's correct.
Yes.
So just for members of the public who weren't paying attention necessarily, there's a list of members who represent each of the wards with an additional members. It's 7 total who are being appointed through this action, right?
Sorry, yes,
Yes.
that's
Okay.
correct. And I think that one of the things that is important to note is that the council members thought very carefully about who to appoint, and also looked at the overall makeup of the entire body to make sure that it was reflective of the community.
And my just one other comment was that I don't know when it's first going to be used by NDC and the city in terms of engagement, like when that moment in time is. But I would just ask that at some point before we're really calling on them to work, there's an opportunity for them to meet as a group and potentially for council members to spend a little bit of time with them to talk about what we hope to get out of the process. And in particular, from my perspective, it's that the committee serves to make sure that every part of the city hears about, knows of what issues are on the table, what NDC is seeking help with, what the city is seeking help with in terms of the site plan and other aspects of this process, so that they're really playing a role understanding the information, understanding the meetings or engagements that'll come up, and just trying to recruit and communicate to people as much as possible what's happening, and to serve as voices, ambassadors into the community to help everyone engage on this.
Councilmember Schultz?
I would just like to agree with Councilmember Tim Mayle's suggestion with regard to getting together with this committee before it really buckles down to actual work. And we just comment, I think we all bent over backwards to identify individuals that would end up being a nice mix of people, and not in more ways than one, including, of course, representing each of the wards in the city, and people who we think have the ability to be very neutral with regard to the subject matter, and able, therefore, to really just focus on process. And that's all we want them to do, and they understand that. And I think this was the developer, NDC, asked for this group to be created, which I think is an indication that the NDC is quite serious, to me anyway, quite serious about having this, optimizing the process of getting community input. And so, yes, whatever we can do to make it be a successful committee, I agree with.
Councilmember Kovar?
Yes, I agree with members Mayo and Schultz. And
the clarification that the city manager mentioned, I asked to have included in here, and I appreciate the fact that it is included in, just to make it clear that it isn't, although NDC asked for this, it isn't just NDC and this committee working it, that the city staff and the city council are part of that process of determining what the key approach and points and outreach focus should be. And so I think it's important to have that language in there. I think we all sort of assumed it, but it's good to have it in there, so thank you.
Great. Any other comments? Sorry, I was rushing us a little bit. All right, now we can take the vote.
All right, Councilmember Kovar,
Aye.
Councilmember Mail,
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz,
Aye.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes. Thank you. I just wanted to give, before we break, the city staff an opportunity to, since we are going on recess, to talk about the next steps in this process.
Right. Obviously, we'll sign the development agreement. You've given me that direction this evening. We'll be working with NDC and the co-op on the first stages of mediation, or however we move forward so that the LOI process is not delayed. Those communications get underway, and we'll be making sure that we have a variety of information so the public can follow along on the steps ahead and know how to get information about the process. So we'll get busy in the summer, and there'll be lots of work in the fall.
Great. Terrific. All right. Any questions or anything else? Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and do the rest of our agenda. Thank you very much. Ordinance, no changes have been made from the first reading. Would someone like to move this?
So moved.
Councilmember Smith moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ooh, Kovar, second. Any discussion? No? Would the clerk like to call the vote?
I'm going to switch order. Councilmember Schultz,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
That would be a resounding yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi,
Aye.
Councilmember Mail, Councilmember Kovar,
Aye.
Mayor Stewart.
Aye. Okay. The next is the second reading ordinance authorizing the FY 2017 budget amendment number 1. There was a change to this. I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you. We're allowed to make an amendment between the first reading ordinance and the second on this budget amendment. And following up on the information that has been provided by the Tacoma Park Folk Festival, that they will not be holding a festival this year, and that the $15,000 that was allocated to them in the FY 2017 budget is not going to be fully needed. They would like to keep $5,000 of the funds for preparing for a larger 2017 folk festival, and the Old Town Business Association, represented by Laura Barkley, has requested $7,500 for the Folk on the Street celebration that would help keep the spirit of the folk festival a little bit alive, help gather volunteers for the effort. And so what I have put in this revised ordinance is basically a transfer of $7,500 from the amount that was allocated for the folk festival to the Old Town Business Association's Folk on the Street celebration for your consideration.
Thank you. Any questions on this? All right. Would someone like to move it?
So moved.
Councilmember Smith, do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Siemens, any discussion? No. Would the clerk like to call?
Okay, Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi? Councilmember Mayo? Oh, sorry about that. Councilmember Mayo? Councilmember Kovar?
Aye.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes. Next, we have the second reading ordinance extending permit parking area 6 to include the 1100 block of Kingwood Drive. This is a second reading. No changes have been made since the first. So does someone want to move this?
I'll move it.
Councilmember Schultz, do I have a second?
Second.
Councilmember Smith, any discussion? No? Would the clerk like to call it?
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Aye.
Councilmember Mayo? Councilmember Kovar?
Aye.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes. Okay, and now we have the single reading ordinance authorizing detailed design development for the library renovation based on the June 2016 concept design.
Thank you. What this does is it allows me to sign a contract with the Lukemar Partnership for continued detailed design work on the library concept designs, moving more towards detailed designs and detailed...
Sorry, they're looking for Councilmember Mail because
I know he had stepped out. Yeah.
He said he would come back. He was going to come back.
Well, I didn't mean for everyone to go. Sorry.
I guess I guess we can't vote without a quorum here. Okay.
Lost a quorum.
So what this allows us to do is to get more detailed information on community design preferences, more information on some of the code and infrastructure improvements and the costs of those that would be required for moving forward with the revised concept designs that you have recently seen. Funding is available in the FY17 budget for that design work. Once the greater financial information becomes available, it's something that would help you make your decisions about how we move forward through the FY18 budget process. So I encourage your support for allowing us to proceed with detailed design development and this information.
Does anyone have any questions before I ask for a motion? No? Okay.
I do have a question. Do we know the duration, how long it will take for the Lukemar Partnership to complete the work under this particular contract?
Not exactly, but the idea is that if we can get some pretty good information by kind of the middle of the fall, it's very important if we want to be seeing if we could get a bond bill from the state government to help pay for this.
Right.
And so we do need to have information so that we can put together a good application for that.
Sure.
So it's one of these that it's a little bit of an amorphous ending point, but we do have some deadlines for trying to get some key financial information.
And Mr. Lukemar knows that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Great. Someone like to move this?
I'll move it. So moved.
Councilmember.
I'll second it.
I think I had Councilmember Kovar and then Councilmember Mail seconding. Any discussion? Councilmember Mail?
Yeah, just repeating what I said earlier tonight, but in a little bit more detail. I'm happy to support this action tonight, but would like to have us consider the idea of having a referendum on this issue to just get the public to weigh in our 2017 election. I think in what would be the 2018 budget year, we could still approve the city moving forward with bond approaches. We could approve the full funding for construction or the phased funding for construction. Just make those contingent on the outcome of the referendum, and I do it for I propose it for the reason of really getting buy-in from the community that we've got people in support of the idea of a expanded, improved, better library. And I feel like fairly confident that we would get that. If I were going to put money on it, I bet that residents would support that referendum. So it may seem unnecessary, but I think it's the good example of something because we're asking people to pay for something that's going to tie our hands to some extent to not borrow money for other purposes, and that we'll be paying back for a number of years. And I'm very conscious of a process that I wasn't part of, which was this building, where we still frequently hear about all the things that didn't go right, that people don't support, that are missing from this building, and having a referendum as a way to acknowledge that dissent, but ultimately say the community decided to move forward. So I'll stop there, and also just say I like many of the design elements in the new library, and it looks good.
Great. Councilmember Qureshi, you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to join in support of this particular resolution, and I would just I would add that I think that what Councilmember Mail has raised, which he's raised with me, and I, with apologies, haven't had a chance to respond. I think in theory is a good idea. I just haven't fully vetted it. I just hope that if we do put this on a ballot, a couple of years from now, so we have a lot of time, there is some process that goes into effect prior to that, where we're educating the community about what bond funding is like and what that means and how that debt is spread out over a number of years and how it impacts the bottom dollar of the city, just so that there's an educational component to it rather than just an issue showing up on their ballot, which I don't think anybody would disagree with. But I just wanted to voice my strong support for this, another very important institution in our community that needs support and needs expansion. Thank you.
Great. And I would just say that I think the city clerk and all of us have noted what Councilmember Mail has put forward, and I'm not sure any of us are prepared tonight to discuss this, and I don't think he meant for us to, that we can bring this up again at a later meeting. Councilmember Kovar?
Thank you. Yes, as one of the people who thought that and commented on this publicly, that the initial design that we had last fall was, I would say, not as ambitious as I would like, but also being conscious of wanting to be cautious on the funding. I think this is a good step today for us to do this part. The money is in the budget. I mentioned earlier, and so we had two examples already of this tonight. So we had the co-op, and we're trying to provide some benefit to them through the lens of what's best for the city in terms of the development. We voted and had discussed quite a bit, so we didn't discuss it much more tonight or at all tonight, the plastic bag ordinance. But again, that does recognize that there's some unique status for farmers markets. And so I kind of put the library in that category. Also, it's a public entity, obviously, in ways that neither the co-op nor the farmers markets are. But I think it's, again, in talking to a lot of people, some love it. Some say they would just as soon use the Silver Spring Library. I think, to me, it's something that is really beneficial to us as a city, and something that is one of the institutions that really makes Tacoma Park a great place to live. We can talk at a future time about Member Mail's proposal. I think that's I would just say I don't share at first blush Councilmember Qureshi's enthusiasm for it, but this is not the time to get into that in depth, and I appreciate where Councilmember Mail is coming from on that, so I'll just let it go at that.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I would first like to say that I'm going to support us moving forward with the detailed design. I think it would get a better sense of how much this is going to cost. I would like to associate myself with Councilmember Mayo's comments, especially about putting this proposal, the bond, potential bond issue on a referenda in front of the residents of Tacoma Park. Last year, this was a different council. I supported moving forward with redesigning the library, but that figure was $2.5 million. Now we are more than twice that amount. And the past development or rehab of the community center did not go very well. So I do not want to jump into another big, expensive project without all the residents being a part of it, signing off on it, and associating themselves with spending $7 million or more on the library. And the other piece of it is, you know, there are other things, there are other issues, there might be other projects that residents might think are more important than spending $7 million on for a library, an existing library, and taking into account that we have a brand new Silver Spring Library that costs, I think it's $35 million. With the county's budget being $5 billion, you know, you got to keep in mind our budget is $30 million, and we're about to bond for almost a third of that, including the Ethan Allen project and the Flower Avenue project. So I think those are a lot of big numbers for a city of our size to think about. So I would support authorizing the detailed design before us, but I would like to see a referenda on going forward with any type of bonding for the library. Thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
I want us to keep in mind something that I've come to realization as we have looked at these design options for an expanded library and made decisions over the last 4 months or so that the options we were looking at last fall were not adequate, that we wanted to take a fresh look at it, partly thanks to Councilmember Qureshi and Councilmember Kovar insisting on it. And we've come up with a more expensive project. But one of the things that I've come to understand is that what we're proposing to build here is something that's more than a library. I think it's important to we just say that, oh, this is a library, and that's what we call it. It's the design that we're talking about now encompasses a number of functions that and services that are going to be of tremendous benefit to the low and moderate income families that live in Tacoma Park, that don't have ready access to the county libraries. And as somebody said from the audience some months ago, the library, as we're conceiving it, represents kind of like the soul of the city, because it's where an awful lot of intellectual thinking and processing goes on, and we're going to be having a teen space in there. We're going to be having spaces, improved spaces for the seniors, a larger space for children's function. We're going to have a large room that will be programmable for all kinds of other works and additional meeting spaces. So it's going to be more of it's a better way of thinking of it as a piece of the community center, because the community center, as big and as nice as it is, doesn't provide everything that we need. So yes, the numbers associated with it are larger and going to be larger, than we had originally planned, and yeah, it's going to, weigh on our debt service, which will be probably spread out over 20 years. By the way, we will finance it with bonding. But we need to weigh that, what we're getting in return. And I think if this library should happen to get built somewhat like it's being proposed conceptually at the present time, man, it is going to be one of the most amazing municipal buildings in the state of Maryland. And just add immensely to the desirability of living in this city and making people envious and proud of the city of Tacoma Park. I'm not at all suggesting that we don't need to be cautious about the costs, and we definitely need to be, and I'm all on board with that. I do not, at this very early stage, think that having a referendum is going to be really necessary. I agree with Councilmember Mail that we want to get feedback from residents, but because it's a lot of money, it's an interesting project. We just can't assume that everybody's going to say, oh, yay. But I think putting something on a ballot and asking people to vote on it is kind of a far from accurate way of judging what people want. I think what, in fact, we've just been through with the Tacoma Junction process and are still going through with that, where we have gotten an enormous amount of community input over months and months and months, is what we do here. And to me, having a referendum where if we get 15% of the people to vote on it, and most of those people who vote are the same people who vote in every election, and the people that don't vote are the same people who don't vote in our elections, isn't really going to prove anything. I think we just need to continue to do the kind of explaining and educating of our residents, and having them come in here and talk to us and tell us what we're not doing right, what we need to do differently, and sharing ideas and all that is really the way to go. That will enable us here on the City Council and staff to make a very smart, sharp, careful decision about the money we want to spend and what kind of a bang we're going to be getting for the buck. Those are all very serious issues, and I thank Councilmember Mail for sharpening our thinking on that. But I am excited about it. I think that we're again on the path to a really super project.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank the staff for pulling this together and say that I was really pleased with the concept that we saw last time we met on this, and I support moving forward with this. I'm hopeful at the end of this detailed design that we not only get more refined design of the proposed library project, but that we also have better estimates, not just for the hard money, but for some of the soft money too, so we know what it's really going to cost, because we heard $5 million a couple weeks ago. Councilmember Smith mentioned $7 million, and we really don't know where the estimate is at this point, and I don't want to see this go any further than the detailed design before we have pretty firm estimates on the costs. And I appreciate Councilmember Mail proposing a referendum. I think it's too early to tell at this point, but I think it's an interesting concept. Thank you.
Before I turn it back to the city manager, I just want to say thank you again to Councilmember Qureshi and Councilmember Kovar for having us take a new look at this earlier in the year, and in particular thanks to the city staff for really helping to move this forward. I'm very excited about this project and looking forward to working on it some more. Just because we all can't help ourselves and talk about Councilmember Mail's proposal, I'm just going to throw out there, it's a little early to talk about this, but having done a ton of work on the ground in Ohio where they vote on referendums all the time on whether or not to build schools or other things, I'm highly concerned about putting something on the ballot when we know our voter turnout in local elections is so low. That's one of the reasons we're talking about syncing up our election. And also, our library serves a very diverse population. And unfortunately, not all the people who our library serves are the ones who actually turn out to vote all the time. So I would have a great concern about putting this on the ballot. I think Councilmember Schultz talked about a great deal of sometimes having, like the open house we had on Tacoma Junction was really useful. And I think building in more of those types of ways to get the public engaged is really important. But it's too early yet to talk about that. So we will save that for next time and vote on what we have in front of us tonight. But I think the city manager wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't have numbers in front of me, but the idea that we went from 2.5 to 5 million to 7 million, they're not accurate comparisons. Partly some are hard costs versus hard plus soft costs and those kinds of things. That's all the kind of information that we'll be getting back to you on, so that we really have kind of apples to apples information and also some good basis to make decisions on. So I just wanted to let you know that the numbers aren't easily comparable at this time.
Thank you. All right. We move this. Yes. Okay. Yes. We can have the vote.
Okay. Councilmember Kovar?
Yes.
Councilmember Mail?
Yes.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes. All right. The last voting, we have a consent agenda. The next voting item is a resolution affirming authority to exceed contracted amount of the attorney fees related to the Tacoma Junction project.
Thank you. The development attorneys that we've been working with on the Tacoma Junction project have a contract with us that was to go up to $80,000. Under the city code, there's an opportunity for me to extend the contract by up to 25% of the contracted amount when circumstances so warranted. We had hit $77,000 as the end of June, and we've had a lot of activity in July, so we will be going over the $80,000. Don't know the exact amount, but given the fact that you're going into recess, I wanted the authority to extend this. It will come back to you as a budget amendment, and obviously we've been watching this very closely. So I ask for your support for this. This is basically it's an affirmation of the role I already have by code.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any questions before I ask for this to be moved? Councilmember Mail, do you want to?
I never know whether I should.
I know, it's hard to know, like, before or after we move it.
So this time I'm going to go before. I absolutely support the authority in our code for the city manager to deal with costs that go beyond the certain level. In this case, I'll vote against it, but I just want to be clear that I support that authority.
Great. Someone like to move it?
I will move it.
Councilmember Schultz, do I have a second?
Second.
We'll give it to Councilmember Qureshi this time. All right. Any other discussion on this item? Okay. Would you like to call the vote?
Councilmember Kovar?
Yes.
Councilmember Mail?
No.
Councilmember Qureshi?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Mayor Stewart?
Yes. Okay. And now we have I think we may lose Councilmember Qureshi, but we have.
Yes, Mayor, that's correct. I just want to thank you for making the phone line available for me. I'm in the boonies, so I have a very bad connection, but I just would like to vote twice for the resolution authorizing us to go on recess in September.
Great. Well,
He gets an early start.
I know. I was going to say, I think you get an early start. So thank you very much for interrupting your vacation, and please tell your family we thank them for sharing you with us for our evening meeting. Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, who would like to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
Councilmember Smith, second.
Second.
Councilmember Mayo. I guess we're all here now. Oh, we have an ordinance. Ordinances. Okay.
Councilmember Schultz?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi? Councilmember Mayo?
Aye and goodbye.
Oh, you are still here.
You didn't sign off yet.
Councilmember Mayo?
Aye.
Councilmember Kovar?
Aye.
Mayor Stewart?
Aye. Okay.
Could I just make one quick
Yeah.
note, which is the agenda online doesn't say that this is a consent agenda. The PDF copy does, but the other agenda doesn't. And if there's a way to just have a flag on that.
We are very unhappy with the way, the particular format we have right now. We have August to fix that format. We're not liking it, so, yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, our last item tonight is a discussion of initial programming for the Housing Reserve Fund.
The City Council, in its interest of dealing with affordable housing, made a substantial commitment to moving forward on affordable housing options by designating $400,000 in the city's FY17 budget for a housing reserve. The general idea of a reserve is that it can add up, it can be loaned and keep, using on a revolving basis in some format for some time. Just a quick note, it sounds like a lot of money, but it's less than the cost of the average home. So we do have to manage it wisely, and that's something that the council will be coming back to. Nevertheless, the council made it very clear that you don't want to just have nothing happen in FY17, that some movement with the funds are useful. One of the things that seemed like a reasonable option that meets many of the needs that were identified in the community conversation on affordable housing and on some of the other discussions is an opportunity to help basically give some down payment assistance for moderate income people to buy homes. And the state has a program for that, the Maryland Mortgage Program Community Partners Incentive Program. The information is in your package. It is something that we could add $5,000 to help towards somebody's down payment. There's opportunities for partnerships with other entities, including perhaps county government, which we're lobbying for, and even private real estate agents can participate in this. So this is something that it would require some good amount of staff time to work on it, but it also is something that's a fairly straightforward program. So it seemed like something reasonable to propose. I do know that there's many good suggestions that I've seen from council members on affordable housing programs that I'd like to see addressed in the fall, but it's not something that we're ready to kind of analyze and come forward on at the time. We are moving forward, however, on preparing for a kind of a strategic planning process for affordable housing so that we have some good recommendations on the needs of the community and the opportunities to fill some of the gaps. So.
Great, thank you. I just want to add a couple of things that the city manager and I did meet with someone at the Maryland Department of Housing and Community Development to talk about this program. And I also had the opportunity to talk to the mayor of Salisbury, Maryland, who has been doing this program for a number of years. And this year, they've decided to target it for graduates of the university in Salisbury. So, so for them, and I know Councilmember Mayo had this question about the program, I do believe once we get into some of the details, it's possible to sort of target and say who you want to receive the match that you provide. So they've decided in Salisbury to do it for graduates of the university there. For them, they're trying to keep young people in their community. And so I just wanted to put that out there and let you know that those are some conversations I've had. So, great. Councilmember Kovar.
Thanks. I think it makes sense to go forward with this program. I'd just like to say that I think we should commit to the extent that we can now to trying to find ways to use more of the money in rather than saving the rest of it to build up. And I recognize that the city is proposing, the staff is proposing doing a study and some analysis, and I think to have a longer-term plan, that makes sense. I'd like to see us undertake a few other programs, maybe on a pilot basis while we're doing that, which we can evaluate as part of the strategic plan. And I mentioned this in a note I sent around to my colleagues and to the staff, that I sort of see three areas, improving quality and supply of rental housing. And I know that my colleague, Councilmember Smith, has some great ideas on that. And also helping the sort of missing middle, which is to say giving an opportunity for home purchase, which this program hopefully will do for younger families and so on, and folks who want to have that option. And the third one is, and I've heard from some folks in Ward 1 who have too much of a house now, they're empty nesters. Maybe there's a way to have the accessory apartments be rented to low-income people with a tax break of some kind to promote that. And in terms of thinking about some populations that we might want to target mortgage assistance to, whether it's a down payment or settlement aid, I'd like to look at the members of our police force and city staff as well. And I assume that whether it's in this program or some other way, we could do that. So I recognize we're not getting into all that now, but I think there are a lot of ideas out there. Someone else mentioned to me making homes accessible for folks who are disabled, and that's come up a few times in the village of Tacoma Park, which I was previously on the board of, and it's not an easy thing to get the money to do. It's not super expensive, though, so I think out of that funding we could probably find a way to do that. So I just like us to recognize that while this program is great, it sounds great, and I think we should go forward with it, we should try to do more in the first year and not just hang on to all the rest of the money. Thanks.
I don't know who is when. All right, I'm just going to go down. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank staff for coming up with this idea. I think it's exciting that we are actually starting to do something with affordable housing. One question I have is, as soon as council approves to move forward with this, how long is it going to take before we start rolling out the money?
I don't know. I mean, there's a good amount of prep work that we do need to do, and coordination with the state. We also have a new employee coming online relatively soon, overseeing our housing activities, so that will be obviously part of one of our first activities. I don't have a definite timeline, but we want to move on this. So
you think it'd be before the new year, or?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'm not
That's
sure.
fair. Councilmember Kovar did mention about other housing ideas or affordable housing ideas. One thing that has recently come up, I spoke to an executive at Montgomery Housing Partnership, and they are very interested in this housing fund and want to see if it is something that they can tap into in conjunction with a pilot. So I'm going to have a follow-up meeting with them, and hopefully Mayor Stewart can join me, and maybe some of city staff. We can talk more about this, but this housing fund has gotten a lot of people's attention.
Sure. I'm sure lots of people would like it.
So I think that's a very good idea. And this is primarily for, these discussions have been about 636 Houston, which continues to be a problem for me in the city. The idea that Councilmember Kovar mentioned that I've been thinking about for a very long time is how to improve the quality of life of residents that live in the small multifamily properties. How do we forget about whether or not, the plumbing needs to be fixed and how we force the landlord to do it, but just getting it done and making low-cost financing available that either the landlord pays back once he refinances the property, or he sells the property. The city can put a lien on the property while we have money tied up into it. But in exchange for this, we would lock in the low rental rates. I think that's something that many residents in the city would really like, because you have some of these apartment buildings that the conditions are horrible, and I have come to believe it doesn't matter how many laws you have on the books, doesn't matter how many inspectors you have on your payroll, if landlords will not make these improvements, they're not going to get done. And I think it's our responsibility as the state to step in and help these residents where we can. I'm not suggesting that we're paying people's rents. I'm not there yet. But what I am suggesting is that we make sure their quality of life is comparable to if you're living in Silver Spring or some affordable units in Rockville. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Mill?
Yeah, thank you. First, I'm happy to support staff moving forward on this program. I'd say that $400,000, I think the city manager said this, will go fast, and I'd rather not have us, put $50,000 in one thing, $20,000 in another, $30,000 somewhere else, because I fear that those things wouldn't have impact. So I'm supportive of this, and I think I see the impact here, and it's something that's closer to being, ready to go. But I'd rather have see us have a strategic conversation along the lines that my colleagues have already spoken of in terms of the different populations of people in the community we're trying to help and how to do so effectively. And I think there's lots of innovative ideas that we could pursue there. And just one comment on Councilmember Smith's remarks. I almost feel like with MHP we have the kind of partner that deals with big buildings, and really what we need is like somebody who's specialized in that nonprofit housing provider sort of way, who's specialized on very small buildings. And I don't know if such an entity exists, but if they do, it might be a good idea for us to talk to them. Specifically on this program, the comment that I had flagged for the mayor was that my family would qualify as defined under this state program. The income threshold for a family of four is $150-something thousand, has defined. So I'm a little surprised the state has a program that even has that high of a threshold. But I would specifically want us to have a lower threshold than that, because I don't think it's a pretty high income level for a family, and I can't remember what the cost of living threshold is in the county, or something that's sort of based on some more reasonable income level than $150,000. But otherwise, go for it, and there may be other criteria that we're interested in pursuing as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a lot of great ideas before you started at the other end of the dais. And now all the money's been spent. So I just add my voice to Councilmember Kovar's that I think we should give serious consideration to our police officers.
Yes.
And I'll pass the baton to my colleague to my right.
I'm going to have the last word, and you'll be glad to hear what I'm going to say. Maybe not.
We'll decide that.
I like the idea of this Community Partners Incentive Program. I read it. I can't say that I understand it, but I get the gist of it. And thank you for turning on my red light. Because I don't have Mr. Qureshi here to do that for me. Because the reason I like it is that it's a program that already exists. We don't have to start from scratch. I realize it'll take time for us to get it there, but I think it's something that it has some flexibility in it that we can make it work for our peculiar needs in Takoma Park. One additional thought, and I want to say to Councilmember Kovar publicly what I said to him in an email is that I appreciate the email he sent around suggesting a whole string of possible ideas, really interesting ideas. And I think it's going to be a challenge for us to sort through what we can do with the pot of money. But one area that I'm concerned about is the problem with the inhabited but very seriously deteriorated housing in the city. I'm not talking about vacant houses. I'm talking about people, a lot of times these are very senior people who've lived in their homes 40, 50 years, and they don't have the money to maintain them. The property has declined, and in order to put it on the market, they're kind of trapped because they need to get the property improved substantially. Maybe, you know, new infrastructure, new heating systems, not just something that our emergency fund is capable of attending to, like painting or something of that nature. And if we could use some money to figure out maybe how we could help those particular kind of citizens figure out a way to get their property eligible in a market sense in other words, to become marketable and sellable, so that then they have the opportunity literally to relocate into smaller quarters or into an assisted living situation and not feel like they've lost their shirt in the process. I don't know how many families or households are in that position, but we know, all of us, a family of people who live in these houses since they were practically since they were built, and I've witnessed these situations, and it's kind of sad. Or you have a similar situation where a couple lived here and moved away and said, "Oh, let's rent the property," but they don't understand how to do it, and all of a sudden they have a rental property on their hands that's dragging them down like a boat that's sinking underneath them, and they can't sell the property, they can't keep it up, and it becomes a blight on the neighborhood as a rental property. And it's those are kind of people that I think would be interesting candidates to see if some of this money couldn't be used to help that kind of a household get out from underneath a trapped kind of a situation, and at the same time get that house back onto the mainstream of market. I really don't know how many we're talking about here, but I do know this is a problem that exists in our community. Anyway, lots of ideas, no time. We'll call it quits on this one, for me anyway.
Thank you, Councilmember Shields. I actually just remembered, I wanted to make sure that I told the city staff this. The other thing that the mayor of Salisbury has been doing with his program is realtors in Salisbury have also been contributing. So the way their program works, they get $5,000 from the state, their city matches $5,000, and they get a realtor to match another $5,000. So something to look into.
An individual realtor?
Yeah, an individual realtor.
Local association.
Yeah. No, it's the individual realtor. So
I'd be happy to chip in some money.
Okay. All right. I think with that, do you have enough direction to, while we're on recess, if this happens, moving on that? Thank you. This is really exciting, and we're looking forward to meeting the new staff person. I think with that, we are going to adjourn for our August recess. Good work.
Love it.
I need a shower. I feel like it.